Yes. So can we welcome all guests and invite guests and participants? Good afternoon, everybody. Everyone that has been invited to listen to this amazing health talk today, I want to welcome you all. My name is John EKPERIGIN, and our presenter today is ready to be introduced very shortly. And before then, why are we here? This is very important because what is a man without a heart? And who is a man with a heart that is not healthy? Now we're talking about in recent times, there have been the alarm raised everywhere. In Nigeria, for instance, just June last year, say many more Nigerians may die suddenly. And the cause of all this have been traced to ailing hearts. And so today, in our series of health awareness talks, we have slated in an amazing talk on cardiovascular disease, looking at everything that can bring down our hearts. And rather, how do we keep the heart healthy? Only one who loves the heart, we want to keep the heart healthy. And to handle this, I tell you, there's no other than a specialist, somebody who knows it all, somebody who knows about the heart, somebody who have taken time to study every nitty-gritty about the heart. Anyone listening today will agree with me that they say many people are dying for lack of knowledge. So we're sharing information today. Knowledge is to be given today, but how many will be there to learn and then utilize what we have learned? Here is a young lady who studied medicine at the St. Catherine's College in the University of Oxford. And it took time out, and then also read physiological sciences, and then to do her PhD in cardiovascular medicine. And during her PhD, she specialized in molecular signaling in the healthy and failing hearts. Of course, you agree with me that this is the person we are looking for now to shed light on this issue of ailing hearts today and what we can do to turn around every circumstance that is bringing down the heart. And after her PhD, she went back to clinical medicine to complete her degree in medical studies, medical degrees. So, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to introduce Dr. Ogona Orumemi Ikide, all the way from UK to give us information today, very, very vital information on how to keep our heart healthy, how to maintain the heart, and of course, the wellness of the heart. And after she had shared the information, I will also come back to add one or two things concerning looking at the heart health from nutritional point of view. So, Dr. Ogona Arumemi Ikide, you are welcome. So up to you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, sir, for the very kind introduction. And thank you for inviting me to speak here today. As you mentioned, this is an area I studied in great detail while I was at university during my doctorate. And it's something I have a lot of interest in. I'm very passionate about it. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity here to speak to everyone today. So I was asked to just come and talk briefly about keeping our hearts healthy. I'm sure we're all aware of what's going on right now all over the world, not just in Nigeria. Every day you hear stories of somebody slumped in traffic or was found passed away in their bed, and we don't know what caused it, but we have an idea. We actually have an idea. Why are we talking about the heart? Why are we talking about cardiovascular disease? That's a term I'm going to be using a lot throughout this talk today. It's because it's actually very important. It is one, in fact, it is the most important killer in the world right now. It is the biggest killer in the world right now. What is cardiovascular disease? Let's start with that. Now, before we really get into the nitty-gritty of definitions and explanations and everything, let's actually take a look at the figures. It is, like I said, the #1 cause of death globally. Right now, if you just take a look, I hope you can see my mouse as I'm speaking. If you just take a look at the first 2 causes of death, you see right #1 up there is ischemic heart disease, and #2 is strokes. I'm going to explain a bit more how these 2 things are related, but let me just say for now that they both constitute cardiovascular disease. Together, they account for 27% of deaths throughout the world. That is actually almost a third of deaths. Apart from that, almost 18 million people every year die from cardiovascular disease. We have this idea that only old people get heart attacks, or only old people get heart failure, but it actually doesn't only affect elderly people. About a third of deaths due to cardiovascular disease actually occur in people under the age of 70. I'm not sure what age we all are here right now, but I'm sure we have people that are very near and dear to us who, if they passed away under the age of 70, we would feel like they were gone prematurely. So it's not an insignificant amount. It's a disease that affects everyone at all ages. Sorry, hold on. I hope everyone can hear me, but please, if not, just maybe send a message to the host. So like I said, it's a disease that affects everybody. We had this idea back a long time ago that it was a disease of the rich people, the wealthy, the Western world, but actually it's a lot of the deaths from cardiovascular disease. In fact, over 3/4 of deaths are in low and middle income countries. That is countries such as our own, Nigeria. So we really need to sit up and take notice of this killer. It is something that affects every one of us. It's something that we all need to be aware of and learn about. Now, the next few slides are going to go into a fair amount of scientific detail about what actually happens in cardiovascular disease, what it is, what causes it. So I know some of us may have done biology in school and this will be very familiar to you. So please just bear with me as I go on to explain a bit more. It's important that we understand the background of what causes this before we can understand what we can do about it. So let's first of all define the cardiovascular system. Cardio comes from the Latin word for heart. So that obviously means the heart. And vascular stands for our blood vessels. So our heart and our blood vessels make up our cardiovascular system. So every time we mention cardiovascular system, we're talking about anything that is to do with our heart or anything that is to do with our blood vessels. The heart, let's talk about the heart first. It's a pump, it's a muscle. It's probably the busiest muscle in our body. It works constantly, whether we're sleeping, we're running, we're jogging, we're talking, our heart is constantly working from the day we are born, in fact, even before we're born, till the day the good Lord takes us. What it does is it moves blood around our bodies, and in particular, it moves blood to our lungs to pick up oxygen and then sends it back around to the rest of our body. Like I said, I'm sure we all know this, but please just permit me to carry on. Meanwhile, the blood vessels, which stands for the vascular in cardiovascular, are like pipes. They're muscular pipes or tubes that serve as a conduit for getting blood around our bodies and our lungs. Together, the heart, the blood vessels, and our blood itself, they serve to supply food, oxygen, and nutrients to every part of our body. This food, oxygen, and nutrients, when they get to all the cells, organs, and tissues in our body, that's what the cells use to generate energy, to grow, and to keep us alive. So I'm sure we all agree that this is a very essential system right now. In fact, it's probably the most important system of the body. Without it, everything else will more or less be useless. So when we talk about cardiovascular disease, although the term says cardiovascular, heart and vessels, the actual disease process starts with the blood vessels. So when I say what can go wrong, we talk first about a healthy artery. This is what a healthy artery or a blood vessel looks like. An artery is a blood vessel that takes blood from your heart to other parts of your body. It has 3 layers, an outer layer called the adventitia of connective tissue, which just holds everything together, a middle layer, which has muscular cells, they help with squeezing the blood along, and an inner layer, which is made up of paving stone-like cells that are like, what's the thing called? Like interlocking in somebody's garage or something. The cells are arranged to form a neat layer that serves as a barrier between the blood and our tissues. Now, this inner layer, the endothelium, is a very important part of our arteries. Like I said, it serves as a barrier, but it allows certain things through. For instance, it has to allow oxygen through. It has to allow nutrients through. It has to allow minerals through. It also allows some cells to go through as well. So immune fighting cells have to squeeze out of the blood vessels into the tissues where they can do the job of mopping up infection and fighting infection. So the endothelium is a very smart organ. I call it an organ because it lines all the blood vessels. It allows things through when it needs to and keeps things out when it doesn't need to. Now, the issue with the endothelium is that it's very, very sensitive. There's a lot of different things that can happen to the endothelium that make it behave in a way that it's not supposed to. Now, one of the most important things is something called oxidized lipoproteins. Now, please forgive me again, this is very scientific, but I just want us to really understand the basis of cardiovascular disease. Lipoproteins are molecules that come from cholesterol. I know we've all heard of cholesterol. We might have relatives or even some of us ourselves might be suffering from high cholesterol. Our doctors have told us we have high cholesterol, we need to take some medication to keep it down. Now, cholesterol is not all bad. There are 2 types that we don't like. Those are very low density lipoprotein and low density lipoprotein. And there's the good type, which is high density lipoprotein. The important thing to know is that we all need cholesterol. It's not all bad. We have it in our food, our bodies even generate it. It's not all bad. But the real issue we have is that when the low density lipoprotein gets oxidized as a result of environmental factors, pollution, smoking, other toxins, when it gets oxidized, you get oxidized low density lipoprotein, which when it goes onto our blood vessel cells, the endothelial cells, our bodies recognize it as an injury because it is an injury. It's a chemical that is not good for us. It is further oxidized to make it even more foreign, and it reacts as though the body is going through an infection. So that means that the endothelium just gets more permeable. And when the body thinks of an infection, it reacts by generating an immune response. Now that immune response is actually, it works by our body sending what we know as white blood cells to the area of infection or injury. These white blood cells flood that endothelium that has become sensitized by the lipoprotein, and it sucks it up. It sucks it up and it makes it, the cells get swollen up and they get full of this cholesterol. Cholesterol is not supposed to be taken up by these cells. They end up getting very fatty. They can't break down the cholesterol, and we call them foam cells because they are full of cholesterol. They are yellow. We call them yellow foam cells. Now, what happens is because of the process of inflammation and the process of the white blood cells taking up the lipoprotein, the wall of the artery continues to get inflamed and continues to recognize the process of infection. And it makes the wall of the artery very sticky. So what you end up with is a lot of cholesterol lining the arteries, a lot of white blood cells lining the arteries. And as you can imagine, if you have blood flowing across the surface, as the blood is flowing, it's attracting all the oxidized lipoprotein, it's attracting white cells, taking up the lipoprotein. Everything is just building up there and there, and it swells and it gets thicker and thicker. That forms what we know as a plaque. It is known as an atherosclerotic plaque. This is the fundamental basis of all cardiovascular disease. So this is a diagram just to describe it a little bit more clearly so you can see what is happening. Like I said earlier, the blood vessel is like a tube. it should allow a smooth channel for the blood to flow through freely. But this endothelium that is damaged, as you can see here, like I hope you can see my mouse, this endothelium that is damaged is causing all of these lipoproteins, all of these white foam cells to accumulate and create a plaque. Now, eventually, the body starts to realize that it can't deal with this level of infection and inflammation anymore. So to even try and solve the issue, it sends some other special kinds of cells to that area, muscle cells in fact, to try and form a layer over the plaque to keep it away and to stop more of that inflammation. But as I'm sure you can imagine, what that does is it actually makes the plaque bigger. And as the plaque gets bigger, the channel for blood to flow gets smaller. I can see some people have their hands raised. If you would like to ask any questions, please just kindly put it in the chat, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to address it towards the end of the presentation. So as I said, the plaque gets thicker and thicker. The blood has less area to flow through, and the flow gets occluded. Now, as I said, our blood vessels are responsible for getting blood to all of our tissues and organs. That oxygen I talked about is essential to life. The nutrients I talked about are essential to life. Everything that the blood vessels carry are essential to life. So if you imagine that the blood is not getting to wherever the artery is taking it to, that organ will eventually become starved of nutrients and oxygen. And if we're not careful, part of that tissue may even begin to die. That is when we start to have the real definition of cardiovascular disease. As this continues, the plaque continues to grow. You know, if blood is flowing, like if you imagine like a plumber's pipe, if the water is flowing freely, it will be flowing very smoothly. Once you have a little interruption or a kink in the pipe, the flow becomes very turbulent. So it becomes like waves inside our blood vessels. As the blood flow gets more turbulent, it can basically knock off the plaque. It can sort of blow it off altogether. This can be even fatal because, as you can imagine, as the blood vessel is getting to where it's going to, it gets narrower and narrower. As the plaque ruptures, it's now an actual injury, because if you cut your skin, you bleed, you form a clot, and that clot is known as a thrombus. Is what we have as a scar. Like if you have, I'm sure you guys all recognize, if you cut yourself, if you have an injury, after the bleeding is finished, you develop a scar or a clot with a scab on it. So if that happens inside our blood vessels, again, that builds up and makes the plaque area even bigger. It's very fragile, the blood is still flowing, and the blood supply to the organ is still further restricted. So in this further diagram that shows the development of the process more, you can see the plaque has developed a gap, and all these cells here are a combination of our red blood cells and platelets trying to do their best to heal that injury of the plaque rupturing. But what it's doing is actually causing more of a problem. It's actually narrowing the gap for the blood to flow even more. This is known as thrombus formation. So even while the clot is there, we might still find that, you might not really notice that anything is wrong, because the blood is still managing to get to where it's going to a little bit. It's still managing to get to where it's going to. So you might not really recognize a problem. Where you might realize is a problem is, for instance, there's something called angina. So like I said, the blood, if it's going to your heart, for instance, it's essential that the heart has enough blood to keep on pumping. So if you find that one of the blood vessels in the heart is narrowed, you might not know it at a normal point in time if you're just sitting doing your normal activities. But if you're doing something extra strenuous, you're walking up a hill, or you're running or you're jogging, and your heart actually needs more oxygen and needs more nutrients to do that work, it's at that point that the narrow blood vessel is really going to impact the supply of blood and nutrients and oxygen to that heart tissue. So at that point now, you might find that as you're starting to exercise, you get a sudden pain in your chest or in your arm. It might be like a dull ache. So that's what we know as angina. I know some of you might recognize that term. At that point, it's still kind of reversible. It's still not terminal because the blood is still flowing. It's just not enough of it getting there to, really fulfill the demands of the heart at that point in time. So people that have angina will tell you that, they're fine, but they're walking up the hill, they suddenly get a pain in their chest, and then they sit down for a few minutes and the pain goes away. Because once the heart now calms down, the supply of the narrow blood vessel is still sufficient. So unfortunately, this situation can still worsen. The blood is still trying to flow. It's still managing to get there a little bit to deal with the heart at rest or another tissue. But if the plaque breaks off completely, or if the thrombus, that's the blood clots there, breaks off completely, pieces of blood clots now rush through the blood vessel along with the flow of blood. Now, as the blood vessels narrow to get to your end organ, the tissue, the heart, the particles, the blood clot particles may not be able to pass, and the blood vessel gets completely blocked, completely occluded. This is where you have the terminal stage of cardiovascular disease, because there's no tissue or organ in our body that can survive for more than 5 minutes at most without any supply of oxygen and nutrients. After this point in time, cells begin to die and tissue begins to die. So where does this happen in the body? There's cardiovascular disease it's a creature of habit. There are 3 particular parts of our body that are extremely prone to cardiovascular disease. Those are parts that have, lots of small vessels and they supply essential organs. One of them is the heart. So if the blood vessel that's affected by this plaque is one of the ones supplying the heart, you have coronary heart disease. And that manifests as angina, as I said. So, the heart is managing at rest, but when you're working up a sweat, you're exercising, you start to get symptoms of pain and shortness of breath. So that's coronary heart disease. But if the thrombus breaks off and eventually a part of the blood supply gets completely blocked, you end up with a heart attack. So that's the heart. The second place that's very, very prone to cardiovascular disease is our brains. That's known as cerebrovascular disease, standing for the blood vessels in the brain. This manifests as strokes. I'm sure that we're all familiar with the term stroke, where someone, suddenly loses function in their arms or in their legs. They are not able to speak. They might have drooping of the face. That means that the blood supply to a part of the brain has been blocked, and that part of the brain is dead. So whatever that part of the brain is controlling is just gone, basically. And finally, peripheral vascular disease is when the blood vessels that supply our legs get affected. So that causes like numbness, loss of sensation. People with peripheral vascular disease get very, very painful ulcers that take a long time to heal. They might even end up with amputations. So let's talk briefly about heart disease at first. I know we all understand the impact of this, but sometimes people might have a small heart attack and the amount of tissue that's damaged is not too bad and they survive. But for others, the amount of tissue that is damaged is too much and they don't make it. I personally know several family members that have passed away from heart attacks. I've seen it happen a lot of times in the hospital in person. And sometimes the damaged tissue is so much that the heart simply can't function anymore. Even for those that survive a heart attack, the remaining portion of the heart is under more stress. Like if you have 2/3 of the heart doing the same work that the whole heart was doing before, it'll be under more pressure and it can eventually lead to heart failure. Most people that have heart attacks don't go back to the same quality of life. It has a very long-standing impact. And similarly, with strokes, the rehabilitation process is really, really tough. The real issue with our heart and our brains, for instance, is that they don't regrow, they don't regenerate. If any part of our heart or our brains die, we never get them back. So if any part of your brain dies during a stroke, it takes a long time for the rest of your brain to try and make up that deficit. So long term, people might lose their ability to speak, they may lose their memory, personality may change, they might not be able to move as much, they lose all mobility on one side of the body and all sensation, they become numb on one side of the body. And, like I said, it takes a lot of rehabilitation, even to learn how to speak and swallow again. It's a long process. And again, the chances of a full recovery are very, very slim. But this is part of the reason why I'm so passionate about cardiovascular disease, because the impact when things go wrong is so huge. But as we'll talk about later on, there's so many opportunities to make changes that reduce all of our individual risk of being affected by cardiovascular disease. We'll still go into that later. So I want us to go into that now, actually, just talk about what makes people prone to heart disease. What are those things that increase our risk of cardiovascular disease? I'd like to split them into two things. One is conditions that we have no control over. We call those non-modifiable risk factors, things that are completely in God's hands. And the second group, the one that I really want us to focus on, because that's what we can actually change, are what are known as modifiable risk factors. So things that can't be changed are gender. Men in general have a greater risk of heart attacks, especially at a younger age. We all know that we can't do anything to change the gender that God has given us. Age as well is a very important factor. As people get older, they're more likely to suffer from cardiovascular disease and strokes, coronary artery disease. Genetics is another very important one. Cardiovascular disease is one of those conditions that has a very, very strong link with our genetics. Those of us that might have family members that suffer from heart attacks, strokes, etc., are automatically more likely. There's so many genes that contribute to this that we don't even understand fully yet. We just know that there's a strong family history. And the final thing is race or ethnicity. Black people, Africans and Caribbeans, also Indians, are much more susceptible to cardiovascular disease. So these are just things to be aware of. There's nothing we can do about them because we can't change them. These are our God-given traits. But the next group of factors are modifiable risk factors. These are things that we can do something about. They're lifestyle traits that we can change. The first of these I want to talk about is high blood cholesterol. Now remember that the whole process of cardiovascular disease is actually kicked off by the low density lipoprotein, which is a type of cholesterol, being oxidized and affecting our blood vessels. So as you can tell, cholesterol is a very, very key factor in the generating of cardiovascular disease. People who have been to their doctors and had blood tests that show they have high cholesterol levels, they would definitely be put on treatment and they would definitely be monitored because this is one of the biggest contributing factors. This is all what I just said earlier. Increased levels of cholesterol increase our risk. Like I said earlier, there's a type of high density lipoprotein that actually protects our hearts and protects our vessels from cardiovascular disease. So people that have a higher level of HDL are less likely to get cardiovascular disease. The next thing I want to talk about is high blood pressure. Now, I think high blood pressure is something that many of us will be familiar with. Many of us will be familiar with this. We might know it as hypertension. I say many of us are familiar with it because Africans actually are the most likely ethnic group to suffer from hypertension. And unfortunately, they suffer from it at a young age. The real issue in Africa, in fact, is that a lot of people don't even know they have high blood pressure. Until you start having complications, until one starts having complications, there aren't really any symptoms of hypertension. You're just going along with your daily life and you don't know if there's any damage going on inside your body due to high blood pressure. This is a very big risk factor for cardiovascular disease. People who have hypertension, there's a very strong link with future heart attacks and strokes. It's a sign that the blood vessels are becoming too stiff to allow the blood to flow freely. This can be because of many reasons. Like I said, again, genetics really comes into it, ethnicity really comes into it. And this increased stiffness or pressure on the heart, on the blood vessels, means the heart has to pump much harder to get the blood around the body. And this has effects on the heart. It becomes very muscly, basically. It becomes hypertrophied, and that affects it as well. It also leads to a kind of heart failure. And apart from that, the blood flow is very turbulent inside the blood vessels because of the higher pressure, and this in turn can damage the blood vessel lining more. This increased workload on the heart also means the heart needs more oxygen and needs more nutrients. So it's more likely to get damaged, even if there's just a slight obstruction in the flow of blood due to these plaques we talked about earlier. So these changes that I talked about when the artery walls get damaged will make the artery wall more susceptible to cholesterol being absorbed and forming plaques. So blood pressure is very, very important thing to bear in mind when it comes to cardiovascular disease. Another thing that plays a big factor, and again, also affects Africans, Caribbeans, and Indians more than Caucasians, is diabetes. Again, this is a condition that people may go around not even knowing they have. It does have some symptoms. You might be urinating more than usual. You might be very thirsty. You might be very hungry without any explanation. You might need to use the bathroom every 1 hour or every 30 minutes without even knowing that you have diabetes. So if you have any of those symptoms, it's really important that you get checked by your doctor for your blood sugar levels, because diabetes is a huge risk factor in heart disease, but also has a lot of complications of its own. Diabetes can damage our kidneys and lead to end-stage renal failure. People may end up on dialysis. People might end up needing renal transplants. So once you have any symptoms at all, even without symptoms, it's important to just check your blood sugars every 2-3 years. It's a very simple process. It can be done as a pinprick test or as a blood test. The last thing, one other modifiable risk factor is smoking. About 50 or 60 years ago, there was no knowledge at all that smoking was bad for you. People were freely smoking everywhere. It was advertised freely. There was no issue with it at all. But now we know that not only does smoking lead to things like lung cancer that we all recognize, but there's a very, very strong link between smoking and cardiovascular disease. People that smoke are about 30% more likely to have cardiovascular disease, either as a heart attack or as a stroke. And that's because when we smoke, or when one smokes, you take in a lot of chemicals, a lot of toxins, and a lot of oxidants, things that oxidize molecules in our body. We absorb them into our body, and these free radicals actually damage the endothelium directly, and they start off that process of plaque generation and cardiovascular disease. So this is one that, if anybody is still a smoker in this day and age, it is one of the most important things that you can be advised to do, to instantly give up smoking. And the final one I want to talk about is obesity. Obesity, overweight, excess body weight. This is actually one of the most relevant risk factors because it directly is impacted by everything else, and it also impacts everything else. People that are overweight are more likely to have high cholesterol. They're more likely to have high levels of low-density lipoprotein. People that are overweight definitely are more likely to have high blood pressure. People that are overweight are also more likely to develop diabetes later on in life. So, it basically feeds into everything. Obesity is a risk factor in itself and also causes all the other risk factors as well. So as you can see, one of those things that we must absolutely try to change is our body weight if we are overweight at all. We're going into a little bit more detail to talk about that. I hope I still have time, about how we can look at our weight, make sure we are healthy and manage it very well. And, parallel to weight is our activity levels. Physical inactivity is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Again, people that are physically inactive are more likely to be overweight. They're more likely to have high blood pressure. Moderate exercise regularly contributes greatly to preventing cardiovascular disease. Simply taking a 30 to 40-minute walk 4, 5, 6 times a week will do you a whole world of good. And finally, one of the risk factors we need to be aware of in this day and age especially is stress. There's actually a scientifically proven correlation between stress in one's life and the development of cardiovascular disease. So we're not quite sure how the mechanics of this work, but stress can cause high blood pressure because when one is in a stressful situation, you get this fight or flee response where your heart is beating harder and faster, trying to prepare you to deal with the challenge you have on your plate. So that can actually increase your blood pressure as well. It can also indirectly affect other risk factors. So when people are stressed, they might be more likely to overeat, they might be more likely to drink and smoke, which also affects our cardiovascular risks. So, having talked about all these risk factors now and talked about what's going on in our blood vessels, how can one tell what is going on in our hearts? How healthy are our hearts? There are some very specific, expensive tests that can give you a good idea of what's going on. You can have an angiogram, echocardiogram, electrocardiogram, ECGs, etc., that will give us a good picture of how healthy our hearts are. But nowadays, what we actually do is we measure these risk factors instead, because the link between the risk factors and the link between the risk factors and heart disease is so well recognized and so strong that we might as well measure the other risk factors that we talked about. So for instance, and yes, apologies, alcohol consumption is also a risk factor. I didn't put it in because it's not actually a very big risk factor, except for those very excessive drinkers. But people that drink maybe a glass of wine in the evenings or two, they have no issue whatsoever. So again, everything in moderation. So like I said, we can measure these risk factors very easily. For instance, we can measure our blood pressure very easily. Even without going to the doctor, it doesn't cost a lot to get a blood pressure monitor in your home and learn how to take your blood pressure yourself. We can measure our blood sugar levels. Again, we can do it at home or our doctor can do it for us, sorry. Even your weight and your body mass index, you can easily measure that yourself. So by getting a whole picture of what is going on with all your risk factors, you can get a good idea of how healthy your heart is. So we're going to talk about that a little bit now. Like I said, your cholesterol levels, blood pressure, BMI, blood sugar levels can all be easily assessed by yourself or by your GP. So I wanted to just quickly give us some tools that we can use by ourselves right now to assess our own health. The first one is, are we obese or are we overweight? There's something called a body mass index that gives us a very good indicator of our health and body composition. Anyone that has access to a tape measure can simply measure their height in centimeters and measure their body weight in kilograms. And once you've done that, you use this formula here. BMI is equal to your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. And that will give you a number somewhere between maybe let's say 15 and 50, right? Now, where your BMI falls on this scale will let you know if your weight is healthy or not. Are you underweight? Is your BMI under 18.5? Are you normal? Is it less than 25 but more than 18? Are you obese? Is it over 30? Are you morbidly obese? Which means that you're likely to suffer clinical side effects from your weight if your BMI is over 40. This is something I would really like us to take on board and easily measure ourselves. Once you know what you're, because you can't just rely on, someone says you look lovely, your clothes fit you well, your husband likes you like this, so on and so forth. This is a clinical measure that directly impacts our well-being. So I would like us all to take this on board and try and measure our BMI ourselves. Another way of knowing if you're obese or overweight, if you don't have access to a scale, is to measure the ratio between your waist and your hips. Now, when you divide these two numbers, if the ratio is less than 0.85 for women and 0.9 for men, then you're considered to be normal. But if it's over 0.86 for women and 0.91 for men, you're at increased risk. And the reason this measurement works is because people that are increased risk of heart disease tend to store a lot of fat around their abdomen. I know we recognize that shape very well in Nigeria, that pot belly that a lot of us carry. Even me, I have one too, but I'm working on it. people that have that fat a lot around their abdomen are directly affected by cardiovascular disease. It's a very well-recognized shape. It's actually called part of the metabolic syndrome in the medical field. Again, I talked about blood pressure. A normal blood pressure is around 120/80. I'm sure many of us have access to a blood pressure monitor at home, or our GP can do one for us. So now you know some of the things that are putting people at increased risk, and you know what some of those risk factors are, and you know how to assess some of them yourself. Someone is asking what are the symptoms of cardiovascular disease. Unfortunately, most times you don't always have symptoms till the disease is very far progressed. If you're already having angina or pain in your heart, then you already have atherosclerotic plaque somewhere in your blood vessels. So it's just important to keep an eye on these risk factors. Keep an eye on your blood pressure, on your weight especially, on your blood sugar levels. And once you notice anything changing, go to your doctor immediately so they can give you a full assessment and make sure there's nothing more sinister going on. Now, I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just go through this next part very quickly. I want to just give us some simple tools for things we can do to improve our cardiovascular health. Like I said, we can easily measure our weight. How do we manage our weight if we find that we are overweight or obese or even morbidly obese? Like I said, obesity causes a lot of other risk factors. It leads to high blood pressure, it leads to diabetes, it leads to cholesterol, and all of these together are individually risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So imagine that all together, they are extremely powerful in damaging our health. So let's just spend a bit of time talking about managing our weight. The first thing you can do, the best thing you can do for yourself if you're overweight, is to lose some weight. Now, I'm sure we've all seen slim teas, personal trainers, complicated home workout programs, gym memberships, this diet, that diet, intermittent fasting. We don't need to make this very complicated. It's a very simple formula. Our weight is a balance between how much we take in as energy and food and how much we bring out as energy. So what we eat as energy versus what we spend as energy. So if we want to lose weight, it's really simple. We simply have to cut down what we're eating as energy, or we have to increase what we're burning as energy. So if we want to lose weight, we simply have to just bear these two things in mind. We don't need to do anything complicated, spend a lot of money on programs and supplements like all these slim teas or herbal teas and stuff. It's really just a case of monitoring what is going into your body as food and what is coming out of your body as energy. Now, I know we all know what calories are. This is a unit we use to measure the energy inside food. Each of us uses a different amount of energy every day. It depends on our weight, our height, our age, how much muscle we have, our gender, how active we are. But there's some ways that we can estimate how much energy we might be using. This is important because, for instance, I might know that I burn about 2,500 calories a day. So if I was trying to lose weight, I'd know that I need to eat less than that. So it's important to have a tool to kind of assess what the amount of energy you're burning is. Most of our basic functions are breathing, sitting, digesting food. Our body uses about 60 to 80% of energy doing that on a daily basis. And this is known as a basal metabolic rate. There's a formula here, which is a little bit complicated, but I can share it later to help you calculate your own basal metabolic rate. You use the same measurement of your weight in kilograms and your height in cm, you plug it into the formula, and you get your basal metabolic rate in calories. So most people will find it somewhere between 1,200 and 1,800 calories a day. Now, there's what we call the active metabolic rate. Most of us don't just lie down in bed all day reading a book or something. Even walking to your front door, walking to your car, washing the dishes, sweeping the floor, bathing your kids, cooking in the kitchen gives you an added amount of energy. So to know what that energy is, you determine your level of activity according to this table. Very light, just doing basic daily activities, or heavy, constantly every day doing some strenuous physical exercise. Someone is asking about DVT. I'll talk about that a bit later because it's not quite, it's cardiovascular disease as well, but it's not quite related to what I'm talking about now. So once you know what your level of activity is, you basically multiply that by your BMR, and that gives you your active metabolic rate. Now, once you've worked out your active metabolic rate, you will know exactly how many calories your body is burning a day, plus or minus a few hundred calories. So what you need to do then is make sure that you are not eating more than that, because any extra calories are stored as fat on our body. To lose weight safely, you should aim to eat less than your active metabolic rate, or even better, exactly the same as your basal metabolic rate. That means that your body will always have enough energy to do the most basic functions, but any extra energy for your normal activities will then come from the fat stores in your body that you're trying to get rid of. Now, if you consistently do this and continue with it, you will gradually lose weight. Now, one important thing to bear in mind that some of us forget is that as we lose weight, our metabolic rate changes. As I said earlier, your metabolic rate is determined by your weight, and you can see it in the formula. So as your weight goes down, you will also need more calories to stay alive and perform your daily functions. So make sure you adjust your calories accordingly as you lose weight. It's really that simple. Now, what kind of food should we be eating? There are a lot of resources out there that, tell us how much carbohydrates, proteins, and fats to eat. And a lot of them are very valid. They give you an idea of how to combine your foods, how to have a very balanced diet. So, we know carbohydrates are essential for easy energy. Our cells can convert carbohydrates very quickly into energy. Proteins provide the building blocks for our cells, which are constantly changing and regenerating, growing. Fats are important. They provide insulation for our cells. Even cholesterol is important for our bodies. And vitamins and minerals are very important to ensure that all parts of our cells, our tissues, our blood are functioning properly. Now, a lot of people are asking about mental energy. Our brain actually uses almost the same amount of energy when we're sleeping as when we're sitting an exam or something. So we don't need to worry too much about how much calories we're burning by studying very hard or, doing meetings and projects and everything, because our brains use a lot of energy anyway, regardless of how much mental energy we feel we're expending. So that's all factored into our basal metabolic rate. Now, so these are the main food groups. We just need to make sure that we're getting enough of everything from here. I want to touch a little bit on cholesterol and fats, because that's something that is very essential to all of us. Even if we are not overweight, we might have high levels of cholesterol in our body. And this might not always be due to the foods we eat. It might just be something to do with our own body composition, our own genetics and all that. But eating the right foods will contribute to keeping our cholesterol at healthy levels. The amount of saturated fat you increase actually increases the amount of bad cholesterol in your body. There's nothing wrong with eggs. If you have normal cholesterol levels, the eggs that you eat will have cholesterol in them, but any excess will still be excreted by your body as long as your levels of cholesterol are normal. So if you're not sure of your cholesterol levels, maybe get them checked by your doctor. It's a very simple blood test. And then you can make a decision based on that, on whether you need to cut down on cholesterol dense foods. But all of us can definitely benefit from eating saturated fats. That's fat in animal proteins like butter, cakes, bread, processed foods, sweets and candies and stuff. And we can also benefit from cutting down on foods that are high in cholesterol. Absolutely, without a doubt. For instance, in countries like Japan, they eat very little saturated fats. They eat a lot of, fish, fresh fish and stuff. Their cholesterol levels are probably the lowest in the world, and their risks of cardiovascular heart disease are also very low. Even though they're part of a healthy diet, we shouldn't use more than a third of our daily energy a day from fats. And the type of fats we eat should have more beneficial components like omega-3s, omega-6s, and as little cholesterol as possible. If you've been told that you have high cholesterol levels, you must definitely cut down on saturated fats And you can also definitely cut down on cholesterol heavy foods. So that's things like animal fats, things like egg yolks and stuff. But also, if it doesn't go down with these lifestyle changes, you should see your doctor for medical treatment because it's a very, very important risk factor. Losing weight as well would definitely bring your cholesterol levels down for most people. Like I said, with saturated fats, you can eat meat, but consider choosing lean cuts of meat. Don't look for the meat with a lot of fat on it in the market. If you see fat, take it off. I know it's very delicious sometimes. Take off the skin of the chicken before eating it. Instead of frying your meat, your plantain, yam, etc., you can try parboiling it and then grilling it in the oven. Because when you deep fry food, it absorbs a lot of oil, but also the high temperature for frying actually changes the structure of the oils to make them more oxidized. So when we take them into our body, that can directly affect our cholesterol levels. We've talked about oxidants a little bit and how free radicals can be very bad for us. When you're cooking with oil, use more unsaturated fats like peanut oil and olive oil. In terms of cholesterol, like I said, for some people, eating cholesterol can raise the blood cholesterol, but for most of us, it doesn't actually have any impact at all. So if it looks like our cholesterol is okay because we're eating a lot of other healthy foods, we're eating a very balanced diet, then we don't need to worry too much. So the key is to take cholesterol rich fatty foods in moderation, everything in balance. Somebody having a balanced diet would not have any reason to eat 6 or 10 eggs a day. An egg or two a day is not going to harm you in the slightest. And in fact, might be good for you because it's rich in a lot of other nutrients and micronutrients. Now, what kind of fats should we be eating? So I talked a little bit about omega-3s and omega-6s. You find these a lot in oily fishes. These actually contribute very well to our HDL levels, the levels of good lipoprotein in our blood, and they contribute to reducing our risk of cardiovascular disease significantly. So fish like salmon, sardines, which we love in Nigeria, mackerel, croaker, catfish, tilapia, these are all delicious and healthy fishes. And when we're thinking about protein, it's good once in a while to change this up and have focus on the fishes instead of just chicken and meats. We can eat them 2 or 3 times a week. Other foods that can help to reduce your bad cholesterol levels are avocados, which are full of fantastically good fats, legumes like granules, some other nuts, foods that are made of soy, fruits and vegetables are fantastic at reducing your cholesterol levels as well. I'm sure we've all heard that we should be eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. They help to protect our cholesterol. They contain a lot of fiber that is great for our bowel health, and they're also full of an array of micronutrients. We're very lucky in Nigeria. We have access to a lot of fruits, fresh vegetables on a daily basis. So we should take advantage of that and try and incorporate that. The main part of our meal maybe can be vegetables instead of rice or poundo or, things like that. And the final thing I really want to talk about in terms of what we eat is salt and sodium. When you're thinking about salt, we should really not, as an individual, have more than 1 teaspoon of salt a day. Now, not just salt, but even the seasonings we use like Maggi, Onga, no, etc., are almost exclusively made of salt with some other flavorings and additives. So, gradually try and reduce the amount of seasonings and salt you use if you know that it's on the high side. And instead, try and incorporate more natural herbs and spices to bring the flavor out of your cooking. Coriander, garlic, ginger, peppers, and stuff. Try and reduce the amount of salt. If you're buying snacks like biscuits and crisps, try and choose those that have lower levels of salt. This will not only help with your blood pressure, but will also definitely reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease too. So what other heart healthy foods are there? I've already talked about fruits and vegetables. They give us a lot of essential nutrients, a lot of vitamins, a lot of antioxidants, a lot of fiber for our bowels and our heart health as well. And then we can talk about keeping fit and healthy. That's being active. I touched on it a little bit. Regardless of your weight and your other risk factors, being inactive is directly linked to an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Regular exercise reduces your risk of developing cardiovascular disease. Not only does it mean you're more likely to lose weight and reduce your risk from that angle, but you're also training your heart to become more efficient at pumping blood. It also keeps your blood vessels healthy and reduces your blood pressure. So you need to do at least moderate level exercise, not just like a gentle stroll in the evenings, but get your blood flowing, make sure you're panting a little bit, and keep that energy level sustained throughout your workout session, because that's when you really get the benefits. At least for 30 minutes a day, 4 or 5 times a week would be great. Simple things you can do, like I said, are walking. If you're someone that drives a lot or takes taxis, you can try and cut out part of that in your daily commute and instead walk for maybe 15 minutes on your way to work, 15 minutes on your way back from work, or ask your driver to drop you somewhere that's a little bit further away, as long as it's a safe area, and walk instead. You can cycle or use a treadmill in the gym. You can do an aerobics class in the gym or even in your home. Nowadays, we have a lot of resources at our fingertips that give us access to free and fantastic workouts. I have some links at the end of the slide, which again, I will share with our very kind host to distribute, where you can see access to a lot of free workouts. Someone just asked if breaking down of plaques can explain pulmonary embolisms. Again, that's actually a different process. Pulmonary embolisms are related to blood clots in your legs, DVTs, which are also cardiovascular disease, but they're on the side of the veins, not the arteries. So those are also related to obesity, but they're less to do with plaques and more to do with, excess weight and limited movement, meaning that the blood pools and causes clots. So that's what actually causes blood clots in your lungs. So apart from that as well, let me go back to the exercise, please. The resistance training, so weight training, things like push-ups, pull-ups, lifting weights gently, safely, carefully, of course, is very, very important in keeping you healthy. A lot of women especially have this misconception that lifting weights makes you bulky like a bodybuilder, but it takes a lot to get anyone to look like that. Ask any bodybuilder or weight trainer. It takes a lot to do that. Simple exercises with your own body weight or gentle weights at home, following an instructor online or something, will not make you look bulky. In fact, it will slim you down and tone you down. Building up the muscle means that even when you're at rest, your basal metabolic rate is higher. And that's because the more muscle we have in our body, the more calories we burn. Muscle is a metabolically active tissue, much more so than fat, right? A small amount of muscle that's as small as this phone will use more energy than the amount of fat as big as this bottle. So it takes up less space and it also burns more calories. So, and finally, just be consistent with everything. To see results, just keep going with the exercises, the aerobic exercises, the muscle building exercises. Try to aim for 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, at least for 30 minutes. Start gently if you haven't been exercising for a while. Make sure you listen to your body. If you enjoy yourself, take it easy. Find something alternative to do. For instance, people with bad joints, people with bad knees and bad hips will prefer to swim instead of walking or running or something. And as you get fitter, build up the intensity. Your body will automatically get used to doing more. And like I said, do muscle building or weight training exercises 2 or 3 times a week. Do not be scared of becoming bulky like a bodybuilder on Mr. Universe, whatever they call those things. It takes a lot to get to that level, but building muscle is very beneficial for your health, beneficial for your blood pressure, beneficial for your weight and your general metabolic rate. People talk always about, as they get older, it seems like they put on weight more easily. It's because naturally the amount of muscle we have in our body naturally gets less as we get older. So that the amount of metabolic rate that contributes to our body also decreases. So that's the end of my talk, really. Like I said, there's some resources here. I'm going to share this with our host so that he can share the links with everybody. The NHS Eat Well Guide has a lot of, advice on how to plan your meals, how to measure the amount of carbohydrates, protein, fats, additional nutrients, and fiber in your daily meals. If you really want to lose weight and you want to track the calories you're burning, Live Strong, my plate, has a free calorie tracker that, you know, has almost all the common foods. You'll be surprised what you see there, even pounded yam, plantain, egusi soup. Just have an idea of the size of the food you're eating, put it into the thing, and it'll tell you how many calories are in that food. So for instance, if I've worked out that I need to be eating 1,800 calories a day to lose weight, I know that my egusi soup had 400 calories, my pounded yam had 400, I only have 1,000 left, so I need to be careful for the rest of the day. The NHS have a great BMI calculator on their website that, you know, if the formulas are a bit complicated, you just put in your weight and your height, and it automatically gives you your BMI. It also helps you to work out how many calories you need to eat to lose weight and gives you some other tips. Fitness Blender is a fantastic resource for workouts. I really, really think, you know, walking can get a bit boring, and you know, all those things can get a bit boring and repetitive. I think there are probably thousands of workout videos on Fitness Blender that different instructors with different targets, even things like Pilates are great. They're all on there. So have a look at that website. You can easily do them at home with very little resources. So thank you very much. Someone asked about what can we do for our elderly that are already affected. Unfortunately, like I said, it's irreversible, but if you do find that you're in touch with people that have cardiovascular heart disease already, they already have angina or heart failure, or have had a heart attack or had a stroke in the past, what you can do is still manage their risk factors. Even people that have already suffered from this condition can stop it progressing. You hear of people having multiple heart attacks, 2, 3, 4 heart attacks down the line, and they still continue with the same lifestyle. They can still modify their risk factors and improve their outcomes in the long run. It's when these things happen, your doctors will get involved. They will manage your risk factors medically as well. For instance, they'll probably give you statins to control your cholesterol. They'll probably put you on antihypertensive medications, and you know your doctors will get involved and manage those risk factors for you. But you can also manage your own lifestyle changes as well if you've already been affected. And someone was asking about varicose veins. Varicose veins are not really a medical issue. They are kind of a cosmetic issue. Again, as we get older, our veins get less connective tissue, they become slack. They still do a fine job of getting blood back to our hearts, but they just look a bit unsightly. The only thing is sometimes people that have varicose veins and have other risk factors such as excess weight and immobility are more likely to have deep vein thrombosis or blood clots in their legs, which can then go to their lungs. Trying to see if there are any other questions. So yes, I will also send my email address and my WhatsApp number to our host. So if anybody would like to get in touch with me, that would be fine. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. And apologies if I missed any questions, but feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We appreciate you so much. And considering the fact that it was a very short notice we got you and you were able to push all this information to us, I'm sure this is really value because people got value from what you have. I'm seeing messages, I'm seeing comments, I'm seeing, and so don't be tired because what we're doing is sharing very vital information that people will need these days to keep fit and keep the heart very healthy. And doctor, don't run away yet because we'll still take some few questions because people are itching to ask questions. Before that, we are going to mute everybody so I don't get the house rowdy. So if you have your questions, you type them out. And just before your question, I want to chip in one or two things here. The reason why we have come to sharing this information concerning heart is because of the alarm. Almost every day we wake up now, we hear about sudden death. We hear about, cardiovascular issues, heart failures, and all that. What do we go from there? That is why we got hold of the cardiologist to explain what is going wrong with the heart, to also explain what can we do to stop this strength. So I'm so happy. But I begin to imagine, over 50 years ago, people lived above 100 years, even 120 years. My father died at the age of 118 years, and he was still very, very strong. I'm sure the last wife he had, when he died, the last wife was still pregnant. So people of those days, they are different from people of today. What could be responsible? We have looked at different areas: nutritional medicine, functional medicine, lifestyle medicine, and we have looked at some current trends. Some of these issues that borders on our heart today have to do also with lack of proper nutrition, the wrong food we eat today. Some of the things we eat today, they are basically not food anymore. They are chemicalized, they are synthetic. Even our environment is not friendly as it used to be. Those days you breathe in fresh air, it was fresh air. But today, oh, the air we breathe in is polluted. Industrial emission. So many things you have in the air that eventually will also go back to poisoning our hearts. And so we are looking here at the way forward. A combination of so many things. Doctor has given us a lot of things that we must work on that can change the tide. And then in combination of what doctor has suggested, I want to chip in very few things here. Number one, let us see how our food, our body can be enhanced. Our focus here remains on the heart, because like I said at the beginning, those who were with us at the beginning, who is the man without a heart? Nothing is left. And so we are focusing on our heart. We are focusing on how the heart can remain healthy. So what can one do to change our diet? What we're eating today, is more of synthetic. Why can't we go back to nature a little bit? Go back to nature. I'm looking at a situation where some of the things we eat today, if we are aware and we are well informed. When I was young, my mother didn't send me to buy Maggi, for instance, or sweeteners, because I took a look at, some of these sweeteners we eat today, they contain MSG, mostly MSG, monosodium glutamate. And I also went further and I saw more than 21 harmful effects of this MSG on the body system. And then we also looked at, what are some of these wrong things, like doctor have mentioned, that we can do away with. We don't need to eat all kinds of things. We don't need to eat everything that's at disposal. Today, our diet has changed completely. Those days, if you were to eat chicken, it was not called chicken, it was called fowl. That local bird that goes round and eats natural food. There's difference between that bird, that local bird called fowl, and the chicken of today. So I also saw information where some of the preservatives, what people use today, chemicals use formalin to preserve chicken. And then we still, frozen chicken, we still eat them. There are a lot of things. People ate local rice those days, and they got this nutrient from the rice. But today, plastic rice and so many other things that borders on wrong nutrition are everywhere. So we are looking at how do we go back to nature and deviate from this fast world, this synthetic world. Take a look at what I'm showing on the screen here. Every sweetener you have today that we put in food to make it sweet, look at the adverse reaction caused by MSG, about 21 harmful effects from just the sweetener you put in food. So why can't we develop the new habit of, no, let me go back to nature and then eat what is right? Again, the alarm while we are on this issue today is, this some few months ago, this is Vanguard, Nigeria newspaper Vanguard, talking about ailing hearts. The doctor mentioned ailing hearts. He said more Nigerians may die suddenly. Why would they die suddenly? Because the heart is no more. as healthy as it ought to be. Number two, because many people don't have enough information like the doctor has exposed today on what to do to keep our heart in the best situation. And so we are still focusing on the heart. The heart lacks energy. In fact, we're talking about good contractility and regular contraction, protection against and deterioration of cells, protection against bad fats, protection against inflammation, protection against homocysteine, and avoiding cardiovascular prone disease. All emphasis on what the doctor has said today. Wonderful. You see, it's not just the knowledge we are sharing today that matters, but taking steps to implement most of the things the doctor has said, because we are going to get out the information from doctor, the recorded version of this for those who are interested. We're going to get it across to you. Whoever invited you today to listen to this talk, please go back to the person and say, how do I get this? Because we'll sit down, listen carefully, and get the substance from this talk and implement. For example, we are looking at the hearts here, and we are looking at one thing the doctor mentioned, the plaques in the arteries. How do we get rid of these plaques? And so the energy we are talking about here, how do we get our coenzyme Q10? What I'm talking about here now is from the angle of nutrition. Coenzyme Q10 is important. It's a natural substance discovered over 40 years ago by Peter Michel. Of course, he got a Nobel Prize. The coenzyme Q10 is important today. And then assurance for good contractility of our heart and regular heart contraction. Then we're also looking at, very importantly, for the heart to contract regularly, the contractility to be enhanced, the natural magnesium. Magnesium is a must for good heart contractility. But today, as we talk, what food do we eat that supplies the body enough magnesium, that supplies the body adequate magnesium? Magnesium plays a role in the regularity of contraction. We call it neuromuscular transmitter. It is very important. So deficiency of magnesium, begin to imagine what that means. And then we're looking at deterioration of fat. Doctor mentioned free radicals. Of course, the antioxidants. Where can we get some of these? And so we're looking at, if the food of today fail to give the body everything the body needs, we need to make it up. We need to supplement, because the body needs to be enhanced to take good care of itself. And of course, the doctor is there to say, do this and do that. And so the food we eat today completely lack most of the things the body needs. And so we must go further to supplement. Magnesium, manganese, selenium, and then these antioxidants. The antioxidant to fix these free radicals that are damaging every part of the body, bombarding the body. It's important. Vitamin C, vitamin E, and all the antioxidant vitamins. Of course, the CoQ10 I mentioned just now, that provides the organ, particularly the heart, with all the energies the heart needs. Plays double roles, giving good energy and as well as acting as an antioxidant. What about the olive leaf extract? What I'm looking at here is from the angle of nutrition. What does the body need now from the right food? Not just the food we eat today, not just the fast food of today. We need to go back to nature. So the antioxidants are very important. The olive leaf extract is a powerful antioxidant. For those who are very conversant with antioxidants, vitamin C is very, very powerful. But olive leaf extract provides more than 400 times higher than vitamin C, curcumin. So you can see a whole range of natural sources of antioxidants. These are body enhancers, the things the body can take. Aloe vera gel, of course, the aloe vera, we cannot joke with that. That's the juice that the body needs as a cleanser, as an antioxidant, one of the most powerful single source antioxidant known. So we are looking at some of these natural sources that can help to also take care of the plaques, the inner linings, to ensure that the blood flows without the pressure on the walls of the arteries. Of course, the fish oil that doctor mentioned, the omega-3 fish oil, this is very, very important to reduce the risk of heart disease, to lower cholesterol and blood pressure, to prevent development of, see, all the things we have looked at today, we need to enhance, give the body the capability of taking care of itself as well. And so there are several natural sources that amount to supplements that have been packaged together today. That are food, dietary food supplements. All these we need to pay attention to as well. The L-arginine, for example, that will help to expand the arteries to allow more blood flow and reduce the blood pressure. So we have put together all this as very good supplements that we can take and to enhance and then make up for what is lacking in the food we eat today. And so what our advice quickly is, before we take our question, is go back to whoever had brought you to listen to this today. The Cardio Health is a complete pack that takes care of everything that concerns the health of the heart. Of course, the aloe vera gel is very, very important as an antioxidant, a cleanser, and a full load of food. It's food in the glass. And then the omega-3. The fish oil is important. The L-arginine, Agi Plus, and of course, the garlic thyme that will take care of the vein. You see, put together all the things that amount to supplements. These are dietary food supplements. So everything that can bring down that, I call it an attack. Anything that is cardiovascular disease that will attack the heart takes away the man. So let us look at it from all the angles. But go back to whoever invited you today, ask more questions, where you can get in touch with the doctor. I will provide for you the information, and where you can get in touch with these supplements that the body needs today. These are all natural supplements. And the doctor also mentioned how you need to lose some weight. Obesity, those days it was evidence of good living. But today it's no more evidence of good living, because if you listen to the doctor properly, a lot of effect when one is obese. It has a bearing on the heart, blood pressure, and so many other things. But there are also scientifically designed approaches that one can use to lose weight now, scientifically and from natural sources. So you get back, ask question, what is senile? So there are packs of product people can use also to lose weight. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's time now to ask questions. Doctor need to be, before doctor, because I'm not sure when we can get doctor again. It took us time to be able to link up with doctor, and I want to thank him for the time he has shared with us today. So, doctor, we are going to hook up to you again now for questions, because some people have some very, very technical questions here. For example, Oliver Obikwe, is there no way one can avert the genetic aspects through a change in lifestyle? Doctor, are you there?
I'm here, sorry.
Okay, yes. So that's the first question here, if you can help us. So is there no way one can avert the genetic aspects through a change in lifestyle?
There's definitely a way to minimize the impact of it. So, like I said, we can't really do much to change our personal genetics, our family history, but you know, everything works in combination, everything works together. So someone that has a family history of heart disease and also has a lot of the other risk factors, they might be drinking, smoking, overweight, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, will almost certainly suffer from cardiovascular disease. Or someone that simply just has a genetic factor but manages every other aspect of their health are much more likely to have a good outcome and not suffer from any cardiovascular disease at all. So even though genetic factors are important, we can more or less overcome them by managing everything else very well. Which is why if you know you have a genetic risk, it is even more important that you take control of the things that you can manage. So, like we talked about weight management, we talked about the food we eat. Very Kind Host has already talked about some supplements that would give us additional nutrients, maintain the health of our blood vessels. Because nowadays you can't vouch for the quality of the food you're eating sometimes. You don't know where it's come from, you don't know how it's been processed, you don't know what nutritional value still remains in it. So, you know, these supplements give us that added security. Managing all these other factors will definitely help to reduce the impact of our genetics.
Thank you very much, doctor. This is from Ufoma. It says, what is the cause of heart palpitation?
So heart palpitations are also caused by, they can be caused by high blood pressure. There are actually many causes, but they're part of the spectrum of cardiovascular disease. They can be caused by high blood pressure. You know, when the heart is under a lot of pressure, it's trying to pump the blood through those very stiff and tight vessels. The heart ends up getting over muscled and also ends up swelling. Now, as the heart swells, it affects the normal electrical signaling that goes on in the heart. And that causes what we know as arrhythmias, or it contributes to arrhythmias. There are other things that cause arrhythmias as well. Someone that may have had a small heart attack in the past without knowing it, it might have affected the electrical signaling in the heart, and that can also cause palpitations. Now, someone can feel like they're having palpitations. They might feel like their heart is racing, but it might not actually be what we define clinically as palpitations, which are actually where your heart is beating irregularly. You might just feel like, you know, if you're under stress or your adrenaline is pumping, your heart actually just beats faster and you feel that sort of anxiety, butterflies in your stomach. If it is just a case of that, that is nothing to worry about. It could just be, you know, you're in a stressful situation and you feel like your heart is racing. If the situation changes and it feels like everything's gone back to normal, it is fine. But if you go to your doctor, they can do an ECG, a trace of the electrical activity of the heart, and make sure that everything is normal with the electrical pathways of the heart. So it's good if you feel like you're having palpitations to get it checked out to make sure that you don't have an irregular heartbeat. Irregular heartbeat can be dangerous because it allows the blood to pool. It's not efficiently being pumped by the pump, which is the heart. It allows the blood to pool in the corners of parts of the heart. And once blood stays in a place static, it naturally begins to clot. Those blood clots eventually can get thrown off into different tissues. It can end up in your lungs, it can end up in the brain even and cause strokes and emboli in different parts of the body. So that's one of the major risks with irregular heartbeats. And that's why if you feel like you're having those kind of palpitations, it's good to get it checked out by your doctor, have an ECG to make sure that it's not actually an irregular heartbeat. If it is, then you get treated for it. There are very good treatments for it.
Very much, doctor. And somebody is trying to find out if exercise is good, but what time amount to, in terms of duration, amount to the recommended exercise or excessive exercise?
So I actually don't really believe there's any such thing as excessive exercise. Um, Most of us, I mean, there are people who are professional athletes, they're Olympians, they're football players, they're bodybuilders that exercise for 4, 5, 6 hours a day. And they are literally in the peak health condition. They have amazing body composition, they have very low cholesterol, they have very good blood pressure, they are extremely healthy. Most of us normal human beings can't really even aim to achieve that level of exercise because we have daily lives, we have families, we have to go to the market, we have jobs. We have to just fit it in with our life. Most of us, even if we do an hour or two of exercise every single day, it wouldn't be too much. The only thing to really bear in mind is, a lot of us have been through life and our bodies have been through a lot. Some of us, our joints might not be as strong as they were. We might suffer from different joint pain. This is where a personal trainer, although they're expensive, can come in very useful. They can advise you on the best kind of exercise to do to limit damage on your joints and your body, especially if you've already had injuries in the past. So, like I don't think there's really any of us will have to worry about exercising too much. Even when it comes to doing resistance training or weight training, it takes a lot to really build that level of muscle. Just gentle resistance training, body weight exercises, following a video or something at home, you have no risk of hurting yourself by over exercising.
Okay. As a follow-up to that, some people are worried. You hear of people who are exercising and they slum and die. For instance, we heard some months ago a commissioner was jogging with the governor and he slummed and died. He was exercising, and why should he? So that's the question as a follow-up to that. Why would somebody slum and die while exercising?
Unfortunately, this is one of those things that we can't predict. right? So if there's a certain condition called sudden cardiac death syndrome. Now, this is completely separate to heart attacks, strokes, blood clots, etc. It's actually a genetic condition that is to do with the electrical signaling in the heart. Now, it's a very rare condition. I think it's less than 1 in 200,000 people in the whole world that have it. But the real problem with it is that most people that have it don't know they have it. They are young, they are healthy, they live healthy lifestyles, they're fit, they exercise, and all of a sudden they're exercising and they have a arrhythmia, they slump, they might not get to a hospital on time. It's to do with the electrical signaling in the heart. It's a mutation, a genetic abnormality in one of the proteins in the heart that means that the signaling in the heart can suddenly just spark. Unfortunately, if you don't know you have it, it can happen, and a lot of people have unfortunately died from this. It's not something we can do anything about, though, unfortunately. I'm sure you guys have heard of a lot of footballers, maybe not a lot, at least 2 or 3 footballers that have died, and it's later been found out that they had this genetic abnormality. One of them is called Brugada syndrome. One of them is called long QT syndrome. They're all genetically recognized syndromes that people have and they don't know they have. Now, if someone passes away, what the doctors will then do, at least in the UK and America, is they will test other members of the person's family to see if they also have those mutations. Their family members will get a workup, an ECG, an echocardiogram to make sure that their hearts are safe and healthy. So unfortunately, it's one of those things that we just, it's a genetic thing that we can't control. And short of all of us having those investigations, very expensive, detailed investigations by experts, for something that affects 1 in 2 to 300,000 people, there's not a lot we can do about it.
Oh, thank you very much, Doctor. We're so impressed. How do we pay for all this value we have gotten today? And many people are itching to ask more questions, but we can't keep you indefinitely. And we just take this one more question. The person is worried. Looking at the new concept of lipoprotein vis-a-vis cardiovascular disease.
Okay, so like I said, lipoprotein has been very important in cardiovascular disease for a long time. It's to do with our cholesterol in our blood. Like I said, for most people, the cholesterol we eat doesn't really impact our cholesterol blood levels. Our bodies handle it normally. We just simply get rid of the excess and we use what we need to generate what our body needs. But for some people, they are very prone to building up excess levels of lipoprotein. And there are other things that can cause you to have excess lipoprotein and oxidized lipoprotein in your blood, such as eating a lot of saturated fats, such as using high temperature cooking oils in a lot of your foods. That causes oxidation of the fats and changes their structure. Now, once you have so much of the low density lipoprotein in your blood and it's further oxidized, it damages your blood vessels and starts off that inflammatory process, that causes the formation of plaques. So it's a building block, unfortunately, of cardiovascular disease, low density lipoprotein, especially when it's oxidized and especially when it's accompanied by damage to our blood vessels. Things like tobacco smoking, high blood pressure, all add up to this process. So, I'm not saying that we should cut out all cholesterol from our diet at all. I'm saying that we need to monitor our own personal risk factors. So if your cholesterol levels are normal despite what you're eating, then by all means continue. But keep on monitoring your cholesterol levels, keep on monitoring your blood pressure, and keep on monitoring your blood sugar levels and your weights, and make sure that all of your risk factors are as well managed as possible. This low density lipoprotein is, like I said, the building block. It is to do with how the lipoprotein in our body is handled and how it ends up damaging our blood vessels if care is not taken.
Oh, I'm so impressed about this. And just the last and the very last question. This guy is very worried. He says, if you are not, or if one is not overweight, but you have the family history of the CVD, are you still at risk?
You're still at a little bit of risk, actually. But like I said as well, apart from being overweight and there's still some other factors that you can control. So for instance, smoking, being active, exercise is, even if you're a healthy weight, exercise is hugely beneficial to reducing your risk. There have been so many studies done that show us very clearly that people that participate in 30 minutes of exercise a day have much better outcome and much lower risks of getting cardiovascular disease. So, you know, even if you're not overweight, you can still manage those things. You can still take a bit more exercise. You can be very conscious of the foods you're eating. And then you can also you can make sure that you're being regularly followed up by your doctor. Because if you know you have a family history, you really want to get on top of getting regular checks on your blood sugar levels, your blood pressure, and you know your cardiac function in general by a medical professional to make sure that you're not developing anything, so that if anything does develop, it's picked up early enough. So someone with a family history and no other risk factors will still benefit from seeing their doctor every year or two and getting a full workup done. There is absolutely no harm in that at all, especially if you have a very strong family history or someone that's in your family that passed away from a young age of cardiovascular disease. So I want to just talk about one more thing. Someone asked about sleeping. Now, this is something I don't know a lot about personally because it's very, very recent, but there is actually a very, very strong link between poor quality sleep and insufficient sleep with your cardiovascular health as well. I didn't touch on that at all, but you know, especially in Nigeria, the kind of lives we live, running around, waking up early, beating the traffic, getting home, cooking, cleaning, everything. A lot of us aren't getting enough sleep. And the way our bodies handle nutrients, lipoproteins, and you know, hunger, everything, our weight is hugely impacted by how much sleep we get. It's something that is still being understood. But it's important that, you know, as adults, we should all aim to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, good quality sleep every night. Practice good sleep hygiene. Don't use your phones for at least an hour before you go to bed, just so that that blue light doesn't disrupt the natural flow of your sleep. Try and go to bed at about the same time every day. Try and get up around the same time every day so that your body knows what to expect when it comes to sleep and your brain and your body can regenerate during that sleep time. So that's something very important as well. Thank you for asking.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We appreciate all this. I know everyone that have listened will vouch for the fact that this is value we have gotten today. But don't you see, knowledge is good, but knowledge that is not utilized is powerless. So the essence of these trainings is for us to go back. One, be aware that there's an issue, there's a challenge, cardiovascular disease, and sudden death is on the increase. We must stop the trend. That is the whole idea here. And so we need to go back to nature and embrace nature properly. See your doctor often and do a checkup regularly. And no one should think that, oh, everything is okay. Because researchers have also shown that today there is no more relationship. It's no more directly related at your age, biological age, related to your heart age. Somebody can be at 35 years and the heart age can be far more than 35 years. So there's a challenge, obvious challenge now. And also we need to appreciate the fact that prevention is far better and cheaper than cure. And then lastly, Doctor, thank you so much. And for those who are in the business, you appreciate that this is our own doctor. If you know Dr. Clement Idigo, that is the daughter of Clement, Dr. Clement Idigo. So all the way from UK, I want to thank you and say God bless you and your family for this knowledge. Wherever you have taken this knowledge from, God will replenish in millionfold. Thank you very much for today. We appreciate you. And every week we'll bring to you more editions of the Health Talk because awareness is key. And for next week, we'll announce to you what other Health Talk we're going to come up with. I want to thank everyone today and thank Doctor most especially for this brilliant presentation. God bless you. Thank you and good night to everybody.
I will share